This happened to a really good friend of mine, which we'll call him Calvin. Calvin was about maybe in his early 20s, and this happened to him sometime when he used to go to college. The college he went to was a pretty expensive college, so with that, he had to pay with the student loan, so he was able to get into the school, but he would have to pay it back by the end of the year, or something like that. Calvin, yeah, having to be able to have a job, he was able to afford some expenses, but they weren't enough, so he had to get a student loan. Calvin was basically going for, some degrees in order to become a engineer. The engineering job was his dream, and he had always had been like this ever since. However, though, it was about maybe after the orientation where he was discovered his own room, which he was led up by one of his roommates, which his name was Seth. Seth seemed to be really interesting to Calvin, and Calvin was just chatting with Seth about certain things like they liked and disliked. However, later on, Seth began to act a little weird. One day, Seth, however, disappeared from his room, and Calvin was getting kind of concerned where Seth was. He ended up texting him and asking him if Seth was okay. Seth had not responded, and this was obviously very creepy. However, Calvin ended up reporting it to the front desk of the college. They said that Seth had dropped out of college for whatever reason. Of course, Calvin couldn't remember why that was the case, so Calvin was basically studying that night. A few nights later, a random number, however, texted Calvin and said, "Hey Calvin, did you like what you saw?" Calvin obviously was confused. Maybe this guy might have got the wrong number. I'm sorry, I didn't know what you're doing. I think you might have got the wrong number. As soon as Calvin texted that a picture was sent to him just recently, Calvin opened up, and what he saw made his heart sink. There was Seth. He was murdered. He was murdered in his own home, and obviously Calvin was nearly sick. He ended up going to the security and ended up calling the police and showed them the number. Of course, they found out the real truth of this number. The police updated Calvin at least a week later, and what he saw was disturbing. Apparently, Seth had a stalker when he started going to college, and his stalker was telling Seth to try to get him over to his house. When Seth got over to his house, this killer, on the other hand, brutally beaten him to death. Of course, the wounds were shown that he had been stabbed with a knife and probably beaten with a baseball bat. Apparently, with that said, Seth's parents were alerted about it, and Calvin obviously feels sorry for him. This story still makes Calvin very sad, knowing that he lost someone that he rarely knew, someone that he wished he would have made a friend. They couldn't really be sure who this stalker was, but the police said that it was somewhat Seth's ex-boyfriend. This obviously still sickens Calvin to this day when he thinks about this one. He never got that text again, and he deleted Seth's contact information just to avoid this sick person texting him if he still had his phone. So this happened to my friend Katie when she was about maybe in her mid-20s, sometime I guess in 2015 or 2016. She was on this app called WhatsApp. It's kind of like a little texting and calling place where you could text people and call them. Kind of like Messenger or Skype and whatnot. WhatsApp was pretty interesting, and Katie had gotten it just because some of her friends had said to her that she should get it. And of course, Katie decided to give in and got WhatsApp. She created her profile and she ended up talking to her friends on WhatsApp. It wasn't long, maybe about a week or so later, when a random person decides to message her. Katie opened up the text message and she saw that it was from a guy named Sam. Funny enough, she didn't know anyone named Sam. Sam said, "Hey, I saw you through mutual friends and was wondering if you wanted to talk. Katie obviously replied, sure, just with, low response, or aka short responses, as Katie was pretty tired. Katie works at certain times, nights, but of course it could be tiring. Sam beginning to ask Katie certain things like, how are you, and what are you into, and etc. Sam seemed to be a pretty interesting guy, so Katie started talking to him even more. But it wasn't long until Sam asked Katie if they could meet up somewhere. Katie kept giving the responses, feeling that this Sam guy was probably trying to catfish her, or maybe it was somebody pretending to be Sam, probably trying to lure her away. These stories do happen, so Katie knew about them. Of course, Katie said, I'm sorry, I'm busy. Can I come hang out with you tomorrow? Or something? Katie always responded. Sam said, okay. This went on for about a month now. And then, not month then, but then Katie ended up getting another text from Sam. Sam asked Katie, is this your house? Katie then looked at the house and realized that it was her house. Katie obviously felt that her whole world shattered. She ended up telling her parents about the WhatsApp and the Sam person. The police were called, but they couldn't trace the number as it was from WhatsApp. They said that they would patrol the area at night and make sure that if they see anybody suspicious wandering around, they'll know what to do. It's been years now, and Katie has never talked or heard of Sam again, and I hope it just stays that way. This happened to what seemed to be my cousin named Madeline about maybe a few years ago. She was in New York for the vacation, and she obviously still wonders and why this person decided to target her. She was basically maybe 18 or something like that, and it would happen sometime in 2018. Madeline was with, of course, her friends as they were going to New York for at least a week or so to spend time with their friends that lived in New York. Obviously, Madeline was friends with them as well, as she knew them since high school, but they moved to New York for reasons that she won't go into. Madeline really wanted to go to New York for a while to see Broadway performances and hang out with friends. At the time of this there was a Broadway musical that the girls wanted to go to. Wicked was pretty popular as they were playing it this time, so it might have been maybe in the summer. Sometime, I guess, Madeline didn't feel well for some reason, and she decided to stay back at the hotel while her friends were going out to eat at a buffet. Now, this was shortly after the Wicked musical, so Madeline was just basically pooped out. As she was just texting on her phone, she decided that she would go out for a little walk just so she can brush out everything that happened. Madeline then texted her friends and let them know that she was going for a walk, but then she would be back in a little bit. Madeline walked down the streets of New York after locking her hotel room, and she was walking down the street, not even thinking about anything. Of course, it was late for some reason, so most of the streets were pretty quiet, with a few people traveling due to, night shifts and whatnot. As Madeline was deciding to wait what seemed to be like a busy crosswalk, of course it was around 10:30, a strange man or someone was walking up from behind Madeline, stopped a few feet away from her. Madeline turned around to see a man that she'd never seen before, but kinda was disturbed by it. This man looked like if he was homeless. To keep in mind, there was a lot of homeless people in New York, so there was no doubt that Madeline would come across something like this. Madeline obviously wasn't sure what this man was doing, but he kind of looked friendly enough. "Hey there," he said. "What are you doing out this late?" he asked. "Oh, I'm just walking around. I wasn't feeling well earlier and I just needed fresh air," Madeline told him. That was what she said. The man then looked at Madeline. He kind of gave out such a creepy vibe. Obviously, Madeline was kind of nervous, but but didn't really think of it much. "Oh, I see," he said. "So where are you off to?" Probably just go to a store or something if they're open," Madeline said. Of course, this man gave out such a creepy vibe there. He kind of looked at Madeline in a very creepy and weird way. Madeline obviously did not know if this guy was just a creep looking for attention or not. This was obviously really strange, as she wasn't really sure what this guy really wanted to. But this guy ended up saying, "Could I travel with ya?" he asked. Madeline did not know what this guy had planned, so she said, "Sure, I guess." So Madeline and this guy walked down the street, and as they were walking down the street, this guy then looked at Madeline, gave such a creepy vibe yet again. Madeline kept brushing it off, but she didn't know why she kept brushing it off. Obviously, there was something about this man that Madeline didn't even think of. She always thought this man was pretty kind. As they were continuing to walk more and more, Madeline then looked over to see that there was a guy. But there was another group of men in the alleyway, and this is when Madeline felt uncomfortable. This man said, "My friends are down there. You want to say hi to them?" "I'll be there in a bit," he said. Madeline then realized that what this guy had planned was probably not good, and he could tell that this guy had a knife. Madeline then booked it down with at least the guy who was following her chased her. He was chasing her down the street while Madeline screamed for help. Obviously, she ran inside the nearest convenience store and told the man of what happened and explained the situation. Of course, with that said, the man ended up calling the cops, but they couldn't find the man when Madeline pointed them where they were. Madeline was in tears when she called their friends, telling them about the whole deal, and their friends came and picked her up. Madeline had never been so scared in her life, thinking that someone who she thought was a friend was going to try to hurt her without her knowing. This was obviously why Madeline would not be going out alone, and if she were to go out in the city alone at night, she was always with someone. This story still sends her chills when she thinks about it, thinking that this guy was known to stalk people, trying to find the right moment to basically pounce on them. Sometime about maybe a year ago, this happened to me and my mom, sometime maybe in the summer during the global pandemic. My mom and I were basically in what seemed to be a little national forest. This national forest had kind of a waterfall. It's not really a national forest, but it's a big park that had at least some forest trails and even a park for kids to play on. There was even some picnic tables where you could eat and stuff. There was even at least some waterfalls in that. My mom and I went there and took our dog there, as it was a beautiful day and my brother was with us at the time. He was just at the park with which seems to be a new friend he made, so my mom and I were just chilling by the park. We were just chilling by the park, usually doing our own thing, when all of a sudden there was something about this one man. This one man comes in an SUV, and he looked pretty decent, to be honest. I don't even know how old he looked like. He might have looked like he was in his maybe late 30s or something. He looked pretty friendly enough, so he walked up to my brother and asks me and my brother how he's doing and stuff. Me being the overprotective sister I was, I looked over to see this man, thinking that if he was going to try anything with my brother, then I could get in the way and try to risk my life to stop him. Of course, he was just asking my brother how he was doing and said that he was just coming to the park to look at around. So the man left and he just went to do his own thing. It wasn't until when my mom and I were getting ready to leave the national forest, as we were hungry, we needed to head back into the town where we were staying at. Now, the town that we were staying at was only for a few days, and of course, with that being said and done, It was what seemed to be a bit of sitting near the borders from US and Canada. Now, my mom, along with my brother and with my dog, got into our car and started driving. I've noticed that the same SUV that the guy drove up to the park was following us. This obviously made me somewhat uncomfortable. I had no idea what he was doing, but something about this SUV and this guy, it obviously made me very uncomfortable, to be honest. It was honestly something that I had no idea what this guy was doing. I had no idea why the guy was following us, thinking maybe he was just lost or something. But it wasn't until then all of a sudden that we pulled up what seemed to be a Wendy's. When we were eating at Wendy's, the guy comes out of his SUV and asks me and my dad, my mom, if we have seen at least the best clothing store. My mom was starting to get uncomfortable with this dude, and I started to get slightly uncomfortable with him too. He started to give out such a really weird vibe. I obviously kind of knew that this was a strange vibe. But after we told him the directions, we went to Burger King where we ate. It wasn't long until we were on our way home where the same SUV was following us. What the hell was he even doing following us, is what my mom and I were like. We obviously had to try to lose him somehow. We obviously drove down different paths just to lose him, but no matter how hard we try, he would still manage to catch up with us. We decided that when we get back to our hometown, we would call the police. Hopefully, maybe this guy will stop following us when we go to a police station. Obviously, within at least 10 minutes, the guy stopped following us, and then we went back to our house. My mom was going to report it to the cops, but she didn't get the license plate number. When he of course decided if she had to go to the police, she would explain the car was an SUV. But still to this day, that guy we never seen that guy or that SUV again. We still don't know why he followed us, but if I had to say one thing, he probably had something planned that wasn't good.